Tonight, the mistakes in the Democrats' case, what you may see from the president's team in his defense, and are the Democrats blocking Joe and Hunter Biden from testifying to protect him as a Democrat nominee? Let's talk about all of it with Fox News contributor and former White House press secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Great to see you, Sarah.
Great to be with you. Thanks for having me on.
First, your reaction to the Democrats' case, citing witnesses like Colonel Vindman saying Trump's phone call was wrong, holding up the aid was wrong, and that ABC News has a recording that seemingly reveals the president demanding to get rid of Ambassador Yovanovitch. Your reaction to that?
Look, I think this whole thing has been exactly what it started off to be. Nothing has changed. We've learned really nothing new throughout the process. I think Democrats have been trying to take this president down since day one, and they're looking for anything and everything they can. At the end of the day, the president gets to hire and fire who he wants. If he wants to keep somebody on, he can. If he wants to let them go, he can. He has that ability, and frankly, he should get to have a team around him that shares what he was elected on, because obviously the American people wanted him and they came out overwhelmingly and voted for him, and he's the president whether they like it or not, and he gets to put the team in place that he wants, that he feels like back up and will help implement the agenda that he campaigned on, that the American people voted for.
Okay, your reaction to this. Adam Schiff claims that the president is pushing a bogus theory of Ukraine meddling. The debate is this: are Russia meddling and Ukraine meddling mutually exclusive? Because Politico did have a story that said, quote, Ukraine officials are scrambling to make amends with the president-elect after quietly working to boost Clinton. And, disseminating documents from Ukraine officials were doing that about Paul Manafort helping a DNC contractor, Alexander Chalupa, dredge up damaging information on Trump and his advisors. Also, Democrat impeachment witness Dr. Fiona Hill testified, quote, that Ukraine bet on the wrong horse in 2016, yet Ukraine believed that Hillary Clinton was going to win. Your reaction to all of that?
Look, there's certainly reporting out there. Why shouldn't it be investigated? We've investigated everything else that has to do with this president. So let's look at everything and let's get all the information out there that we can. But at the end of the day, I don't think Adam Schiff is the person I want to listen to on anything. He has no credibility left. He has shown his true colors. He has been wrong on point after point when it comes to this president. He's continued to peddle false information, saying he unequivocally had evidence against this president in wrongdoing that turned out not to be true. He said the Nunes report was false. It wasn't. I mean, everything that Adam Schiff says turns out to be wrong.
Everything?
Well, maybe not everything, but certainly when it comes to this president and this process, he's certainly not the guy I'm going to look to for any answers, and certainly not for anything on credibility is not coming from Adam Schiff. He's got an agenda, and he's playing it out.
And what he's been found to be dubious about, he doesn't correct the record. So far as we have seen, getting back to the preview of what you could possibly expect the president's team to bring in their defense, Sarah, Fiona Hill also said that, quote, many Ukrainians said some pretty disparaging things about then candidate Trump. She said that in testimony. I want your reaction also to this. Possibly the Trump team could bring up how U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Maria Yovanovitch, testified that Obama officials had instructed her on what to say about Burisma in preparing for her Senate confirmation hearings, that she should refer questions about that to Vice President Joe Biden if she was going to be asked about Hunter's conflict of interest. Do you think the president could avail himself of that in his defense?
Look, I think that the White House team is incredibly well prepared, and I think we're going to see them lay out a strong case in defense of the president tomorrow. I think that'll kick off. I think we're going to see a lot of those pieces come together. So far, the only real corruption and the only wrongdoing that I feel like we've really seen and really learned a lot about has to do with the Bidens. That's the big question that the Democrats don't want to answer, and they continue to try to avoid. And I think you'll see the White House leaning on that. I certainly think people like Lindsey Graham are asking those questions and making sure that that's part of the discussion. I think it's the right way to go.
You wonder if the Democrat establishment in Congress is trying to protect Biden because they want him to be the nominee and blocking Biden from testifying. Most of the Democrat witnesses said they saw no evidence of quid pro quo. Democrats' own impeachment witness, State Department official George Kent, testified that he repeatedly raised concerns with the Obama administration and Vice President Joe Biden about the conflict of interest problem with Hunter Biden. Watch this.
But after you expressed the concern of a perceived conflict of interest at the least, the Vice President's engagement in Ukraine didn't decrease, did it?
Correct, because the Vice President was promoting U.S. policy objectives in Ukraine.
And Hunter Biden's role on the board of Burisma didn't cease, did it?
To the best of my knowledge, it didn't, and my concern was that there was the possibility of a perception of a conflict of interest.
Sarah, your reaction to Democrats like Jerry Nadler and Chuck Schumer saying that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden is not pertinent to the articles that they have brought, it's not related. Your reaction to that?
I mean, it's mind-blowing, and it's hypocrisy at its worst. The idea that it's not part of this discussion is absurd. The whole reason this entire thing has started was because the president promised to look out and seek out corruption, and that's exactly what he's doing, which he should be doing. And they're trying to attack him for that. If they're not going to look at whether or not there was actual corruption, the president was right to go after it, then this is a huge waste of time, which I think it is anyway. I think most of America sees it that way, which is why they're not even paying attention. No one has been watching these proceedings over the last couple of days, and I think that's because nobody sees any wrongdoing by the president, and they don't see this as a serious process that the Democrats are laying out. So at this point, I think that America is ready to move on. Whether or not Democrats are trying to protect Joe Biden, I don't know. I don't think any of the candidates so far that we've seen, whether it's Biden, Bernie, or Warren, that's kind of their top of the list right now. I don't think any of those people are going to beat President Trump in November. And I think that this whole process is backfiring on each of them, and it's certainly not making Democrats look better or any stronger to face this president in November.
Yeah, Bill Clinton advisor Mark Pence said what the president did was, quote, boneheaded, but is it an impeachable offense? Does it rise to that? He says it doesn't. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Come back soon.
Thank you.